Hello, my name's Alison Kinnaird and I've come over from Scotland to do a class in engraving. I'm delighted to be in Corning again because it's always a pleasure, and I've got a great class here this week, so I'm really enjoying myself. I'm going to demonstrate some copper wheel engraving. It's not a common thing these days, so it's nice to be able to show people what you can do with it. It's a very slow process and quite detailed and small scale. So I'm doing something which is small and detailed because I know I can fit it into the time we have. I'm going to engrave a bee. So to start off, when I'm thinking of doing any engraving, I look at the subject and I do some drawings, because drawing is really important when you're thinking of engraving, because engraving does pick up every detail. Now you can decide to leave out details, but you can't put them in afterwards if you don't know where they go. So it's a good idea. I went out in my garden and I drew bees for an afternoon, and it's just a pleasure to do that anyway, so very enjoyable. So I do know what a bee looks like, and then I take some Indian ink and I draw, this is the body of the bee. I draw it onto my piece of glass. And it's a good subject for wheel engraving because it's made up of simple shapes. And that's one of the things to look for when you're using wheel engraving. It's important to use the right technique for certain subjects, for particular subjects. So anything that has got rounded shapes in it, small rounded shapes, is perfect for wheel engraving. Whereas if you were doing something that was flat and geometric, you'd be better to use sandblasting. So use the right technique for the right subject. So we have a lathe here which is set up for me. It is a very simple mechanism. It's a very old technique. Basically, the Babylonians used something similar to cut their seals out of semi-precious stones. The Romans did a great job on cameo engraving, so it's been going a long, long time. The only modern addition really is that we have an electric motor, thank goodness now, instead of having to pedal the lathe to turn it. So the lathe is turning spindles with copper wheels on the end, and I'm going to be applying a mixture of carborundum powder mixed up with oil. We just use a baby oil these days, which is also good for your hands, does no harm. And it's important to pick the right wheel for the right job. So I'm going to start off with the body of the bee. And it's almost always, it surprises people that you use almost always a bigger wheel than you think. So this looks like quite a small mark, but actually I'm going to be using one of the bigger wheels to make it. This wheel has got a slightly rounded edge, so it should make a nice round mark. So I'll just work into that. So put on my magnifying visor, which I need nowadays. Turn on the wheel. These are my elbow pads to support the elbow because you're going to be working at it for quite a long time. And we have a tongue that comes down and it stops the carborundum powder from spraying onto you, which we hope it's going to do. Apply the carborundum. Make sure that that's just touching a little bit. You go for the center of the shape, and it will take several cuts to make this. Wiping it off as you go. And we just keep going on the same cut until it's a nice deep shape, because I want it to show up well. The thing about engraving is that it sounds ridiculous, but you can't see what you're doing at the moment that you do it. So a lot of it is done by sound. You can hear when the wheel touches the glass, and by feel, because you can feel when you're reaching the edge of the cut. So you can see the cut is getting slightly bigger each time. That's just about ready. So that's the main body done, the thorax, and I'm going to do the rest of the body now that slopes away there. Reapply the carborundum. I'm going to take the side of the wheel and move it in a curve. I found that Indian ink is a good thing to draw with. I use a rotring pen, an architect's pen, to do the drawing because it's quite hard to get a drawing instrument that actually stays on while you're engraving. Some of the plastic type pens, they come off with the carborundum and the oil. And things like markers, they just come off almost immediately. And as you can see, because you're doing very defined shapes, it's important that you can actually see what you're doing. You keep track of it so that you're not, it's actually very hard to sketch, as it were, on glass with wheel engraving. And this is partly because to get the angle of the wheel, you're having to turn the glass upside down, so you can't actually see the design so well. You can't draw so well if you were using the glass upside down. So it's important to have a drawing that actually stays on. And you just have to keep wiping the carborundum mixture out of the way so that you can see what you've done. Getting down to the end of the tail there. Nearly there. It. So I'll wipe it off almost completely, and we can see how the design is beginning to grow there. I'm going to change the wheel now and put the sections onto the bee's body. And because I've done some studies, I know that a bee normally has about 7 sections in its tail, so we'll put in something like that, but you can also have a bit of artistic license unless you're trying to be really botanically accurate. So slightly smaller wheel. I will use, I think I'll use this one. It's important to be gentle when you're tapping the wheels in because you don't want to put them off true. I'm just going to define the sections in the bee's tail using the edge of the wheel. There we are. Make that one a little bit deeper. Okay. Wipe it off and have a look again. That's the bee's tail done. You spend most of your time changing wheels actually, because each one does such a specific job. It's important to get the right wheel for the right cut. Now I'm going to do the bee's head, and I think I'll use this one. It's a nice, smaller, rounded wheel, and it should do a perfect job. Using it slightly sideways so that I get an oval. There's the head in. I think I'll make it just a little bit bigger down at the bottom. Just extending the cut a little bit. Here we are, that's better. I have great admiration for the people who have engraved in the past without being able to use electric motors, because to keep your hands steady and pedal at the same time must have been incredibly difficult. So I'm going to put the bee's eye in now. As I say, you can go into great detail. And keeping the tongue on each wheel, because of the different size, takes a little bit of time. So that's going to go on top of the cut that I made for the head. I'll use it this way. That's its eye in. And then I'm going to give it a very slight polish, which you can do with the same wheel, and just take off the carborundum, put a little bit of oil on, and go back into the same cut. That just brings up a little highlight in it. Okay. If you want a bright polish, you have to use cerium oxide polishing powder, but this just gives a little bit of definition to it. Now I'm going to do its legs. And for that, I'm going to use a wheel which has got a flat side and defined edges, because a bee's legs are divided into 3 sections, and they're kind of D-shaped. They all sort of link into each other, so I'm going to do them with 3 different cuts using the edge of this wheel. I want the edge of the cut to be this way around, so turn the glass upside down, which is, as I say, why you have to draw it in. Here's one section, the front leg, another section, just go over that one again, extend it a little bit, and then down with the front section. There we are. And then I'm going to do the next leg. Three sections again. This is the back leg. I'm going to do a little bit of a cut here just to define this a little bit more. And I'm going to put the bee's tongue in, because they put out a little sort of proboscis so that they can eat up the nectar. There we are. So there's the legs in 3 sections each. And we're going to go for the antennae next. That's good. And the antennae are obviously very thin things, so we're going to use a nice thin wheel for that. Which one would do? I think this one would be nice. Now, the reason we use copper for wheels is because copper is hard enough to do the cut, to keep its shape for a while for the cut. It does wear down with the carborundum, but it's also soft enough to hold the carborundum. But if you want to be sure of the edge of it, you have to shape the wheel from time to time. So because I want a nice sharp edge on this one, I'm going to just give it a little file to make it properly V-shaped again. You have to be very gentle so as you don't put it off true. But the difference between one of the differences between copper wheels and diamond wheels is that you can file the copper wheel to exactly the shape that you want, whereas you can't alter the shape of diamond wheels. Get the tongue down here. There we are. Here's the antennae coming in. My drawing is just wearing off a little bit, so it's just about time to get them in. There we are. There's the antennae in. And I'm going to use this same wheel to do some of the hairs on the bee's body. Make it a nice fluffy bee. So I'm going round the main bit of the body now, the thorax, to make it nice and hairy, furry. You do spend a long time just doing little cuts, and gradually the image grows, so getting there. I'm going to do the bee's feet now. You can work really small. And I'm going to use a tiny wheel for that, and that will be this one, which is very small. Just get that touching if I can. Here's bee's feet. I think this is actually going a little bit fast for this because you can slow down the wheels as well. So I'm going to slow it down at this point. That's the bee's feet in. I'm just going to put a little dot on some of the knees, some of the joints there in the legs. There we are. So the main bit of the bee is pretty well done now. And you may have noticed that I haven't put wings in this bee as yet, and that's because I'm actually going to do this bee on 2 different pieces of glass, and the reason for that will become clear later on, but I'm going to leave that one there just now. That one's finished. And I'm going to get the other piece of glass that I've drawn the wings onto. And here is the glass with the wings drawn on. And I'm going to use a bigger wheel again to do the wings. This one's got a little bit of an edge because you want to define the front edge of the wing. Keep it quite strong. That wheel sounds just a little bit loose, so I'm just going to check it. You don't want to start engraving and have it loose, so I'm going to throw it in again and give it a tap. Just to seat the lead sleeve inside it. Come on now. There we are. If you hear rattling, you want to stop immediately and not progress your engraving anymore because your wheel is loose, and that's not good for either the wheel or for your engraving. So I'm going to do the front edge of the wing here. I haven't got enough carborundum on here. You can hear that immediately. To get that tag on it. This stops the carborundum spraying up in your face, but it also holds it on the wheel. But every glass engraver has forgotten to put it down sometime and gone home with a big row of dots up your, black dots up your face. People stare at you in the street. I'm taking it up to the top of the wing here. Just round the top edge. And then down towards the other one. This is the back wing. And the thing about wheel engraving is that you're creating form, so the deeper you cut, the more it looks as if it's standing out. And that means that you're working from the back forwards. Turn the speed down just a little bit here. Get a nice shape to the edge of the wing. So this one is the back wing because I'm going to engrave the front wing a little bit deeper, and that'll make it look as if it's standing out. And I want a slightly rough surface on the surface of the wing, because the wings are slightly faceted. So like that. And now I'm going to do the second wing. Right to the top there. And the lower part of the wing. And just fill it in a little bit. And then I'm going to take a smaller wheel and take over the surface of this wing, because I want to give these slight facets, and I want to give them a very slight polish as well, and I can do that by just using the oil rather than the carborundum. I'm not cutting anymore. So change wheels again. And I will use this one. I want a fairly flat wheel for it. And this is just giving a little bit more texture to the wing itself. Use oil rather than the carborundum. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is to put the veins in the wings. You really can go into great detail. Wheel engraving. With wheel engraving, actually, in many ways, the large areas are the difficult things to do. Engraving detail is usually a pleasure. Here we are. I think that's got a little polish on it, so it'll make the wings sparkle a little bit. Go around the top of that edge just a tiny bit first. There we are, that's fine. So that's the wing done. And for the veins in the wing, I'm going to use a nice line wheel again. It needs to be very sharp because you want them really beautifully delicate. And I think this is the one. Nice line wheel here. Again, I'm going to file it slightly. There we go. With copper wheels, because copper is easily obtained and it's easily worked as well, almost all copper wheel engravers learn to make their own wheels. So you can cold rivet them onto the spindles, and you start off with your wheel about this size, about 4 inches, and you would wear it down to, it just gradually would wear down to a pinhead. So you get a lot of work, a lot of use out of these wheels. Each wheel would last for years, and it's just a really nice thing to have. Now, I've just about got enough oil in here, so I think we'll manage to do the veins on the wings, and then that's the engraving completed. Other wing. Actually, I think I'll sharpen it again. It's amazing how quickly the copper loses its edge when you're doing something really sharp. Don't want to get filings into my carborundum. There we are. Okay, so that's the engraving complete, and we get to one of the best moments of wheel engraving, because this is where we wash the glass, and this rather messy, mucky procedure turns into something shiny and sparkling, and you can see the point in doing it. So I'm going to go over to the sink just now and take my 2 bits of glass and give them a good wash. And we will go over here. Always got to be careful of glass. It scratches very easily. And wash the hands. I started glass engraving more than 50 years ago, and it was kind of by accident, because I was actually turned down for art college, and that was a great disappointment at the time. But instead I just went off to university and did what the other subjects that I was interested in, which were Celtic studies and archaeology. And they do come into my work, there's no doubt. But I just happened to meet a glass engraver when I was on holiday in the north of Scotland with my family. And he saw some drawings that I'd been doing. And he said, those drawings would work well in glass, and you should come and work with me for the summer. So that was it, I just got hooked. I think that's clean enough. I think we've got all the carborundum out of there. So we'll put that aside and dry it well. Get some towels out. So this is kind of like classic wheel engraving, because you're carving into the glass, and you come up with this frosted glass surface. And I'll put this to the side there and do the wing. But as you can see, glass engraving, wheel engraving in particular, is naturally quite small scale. This is partly because when you're working on the lathe, you've got the lathe and then you've got the spindle and the wheel, and you can't use any glass bigger than double that length, because otherwise the lathe gets in the way. So you're limited to about 12 or 14 inches on the size of glass that you can actually work on. But I've been trying over the years to find other solutions to the way that you can show your glass, the way you can deal with your glass, the way you can make the glass more contemporary in many ways. And one of the things that I do is layering the glass, and this is what I'm going to be doing in this case. I'm putting 2 pieces of glass, one on top of the other. It's carefully worked out, of course, so that the images, hopefully, will actually sit well with each other, just sit in the right place. And the other thing that I've been using, which is really, really important for glass engraving, is getting light into it. Because, of course, glass doesn't really come to life until you have light coming into it from one direction or another. But glass engraving in particular, and glass engraving is, to be honest, very often really badly shown in museums and galleries. So I've been working with putting light into glass, and I've got a little temporary setup here that I can show you. I'm going to put my bee into this. Here's one I prepared earlier. I made a little bit of honeycomb so that the bee can sit into it. And I'm going to put my lights on here. I've got LED tape sitting into channels here because LEDs, what you can get from LEDs these days is wonderful for engraving, for showing engraving and for showing glass, because LEDs have become so small scale now. You can get them to fit basically any situation. And it works really well with sheet glass because I have a channel, I put LED tape into it, tiny LED tape into it, and then you can light it up. Now the LEDs in this case are white, and what I do is I either paint the bottom of the glass with glass paint, which can be made permanent by baking it in an oven, or you can put strips of dichroic glass along the bottom as well, and whatever colour you put on the bottom, the light will transmit that colour up through the sheet of glass. And wherever you interrupt the sheet of glass with your engraving or any mark of any kind, it will actually pick up that particular mark. And when I'm experimenting, I quite often use these, I've got sort of books of gels that they use for flood lighting, for stage lighting. And you can actually cut strips of these and put them underneath your glass, stick them on, put them in the lights and see. You can experiment, you can turn them all sorts of different colours. I could have a green bee, for instance. I don't want a green bee, but you could have any colour just temporarily and then fix it later on with the permanent glass paint or the dichroic glass. So in this case, though, I've engraved the wings on the front, and I'm going to slot it into the next slot, and they're going to stay white. And then I'm going to put my bee in, and underneath there I've actually put some strips of this theatre gel already, so it's going to turn my bee slightly orange, and then we're going to have the bee sitting against its white wings. So you can actually get several layers of colour into your engraving, and I think that that's quite an exciting thing to do with it, because, as I say, until you see the light coming through the glass, it really doesn't come alive, and it's a great way of using modern technology alongside a very ancient technique, and I find that very satisfying. So basically, that's my demo.